In the insufferably long, festering shit pile that was E3 2019, filled with CGI trailers and promises that are probably not going to be realized, a few games stood out for better or for worse, and one of them is of course the subject of this video, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Revealed a few months ago as Project Z with a debut trailer, showcasing the graphics, what the story would be about, revealing that it would be an open-world RPG set during the Z era, and would cover at the very least the Saiyan and Frieza arcs. In E3 2019, the game got yet another trailer showcasing even more footage, and nearly 20 minutes of gameplay, where we see how the open-world elements work, some of the RPG stuff, the control scheme, along with teases of various side quests including Launch, Android 8, Muten Roshi, and a whole bunch of other stuff I'm not going to list off. Reception to this project has, in a lot of instances, been very, very positive. A lot of people are really excited by the idea of CyberConnect 2 of all people, of Naruto and Azura's Wrath fame, doing a Dragon Ball video game, along with the brand spanking new engine, to apparently capture all the visual glory of the anime. While the rest of us, with any modicum of actual fucking taste, rolled our eyes and thought to ourselves, why the fuck is a game from 2006 being released now? See, the Dragon Ball game is retelling the Z portion of the series is nothing new by any stretch of the imagination. It's basically a mandatory feature in the vast majority of them. But because of the development of technology and when Dragon Ball became big, you weren't really able to get a fully faithful looking 3D action game that tries to recreate the anime's visuals, and that was one of the big selling points of the HD era of the Dragon Ball Z series. In the time of the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, you were finally able to get video games that were able to pretty damn accurately emulate the anime's visuals in the form of mostly fighting games. And while I'm personally not very big on novelties and or gimmicks like this apparently selling an entire franchise, I will admit that I can understand why it was appealing at the time. We'd never really gotten something that close looking to the anime beforehand. People have been wanting that for so long by that point that I can understand why people were so excited by ultimately whatever games like Burst Limit and Ultimate Tenkaichi. But even the Dragon Ball games, in all their vapid glory, have in these past few years tried to at least mix up the formula somewhat. Dragon Ball Fusions and FighterZ have their own storylines. Dragon Ball Xenoverse, while a game that very much rehashes a whole lot of stuff and doesn't take its concept anywhere near it should, still manages to at least include some new elements and story beats from all across the Dragon Ball franchise, quite a few of which had never been done before at the time. Hell, even Dragon Ball Legends, which is more or less a rehash of Z in a lot of structural ways, still finds new and interesting character interactions and dynamics that we hadn't really thought of before to spice up the formula. Which is one of the things that makes Kakarot look so bleh to people like me. I and quite a few other people do not give a fuck about seeing the same shit over and over and over again with just a new gameplay engine and maybe a new developer. This is a storyline we know like the back of our hands, and so the idea of seeing it yet again doesn't really hold much sway for us. And though a lot of the original Dragon Ball Z video game storylines can be pretty damn bad, I would much rather get a scenario where someone tries to do an original game and has the chance to execute it well, over seeing fucking Raditz, Vegeta, Frieza, Cell, and Majin Buu again. But one defense I see lobbied at this game is the 30th anniversary angle. See, Dragon Ball Z debuted in 1989 on Fuji TV, and since I assume you can all do basic ass math, it's been 30 years since then. So everyone wants to capitalize on the big Z anniversary by doing a video game release like this. And to that I say, it's also the 35th anniversary of the start of the entire Dragon Ball series with the manga, and I don't see a single fucking Kid Goku game anywhere, now do you? And no, him being kind of included in FighterZ through GT Goku does not count. But okay, let's say I can get over the Z rehash aspect. Let's put that all aside and focus on what the developers are trying to do. They want to make an open-world RPG game where you're going to be playing as Goku and potentially other characters, and going through faithful recreations of the Z storyline. Let me reiterate, they want to make an open-world RPG with characters whose appearances you majoritively or might not be able to change at all, whose personalities are predetermined, whose actions and consequences of those actions are also predetermined because they want to stick to the pre-established storyline, and whose abilities you won't be able to fucking change in any meaningful capacity. Now, call me crazy, but when I play an RPG, I want to roleplay someone. I want to make a wide variety of different characters with the toolset available to me to not only edit how my character looks, but how he or she acts. What abilities do they have? How their personality will start and change? And how these various alterations will affect the storyline. If I'm playing an evil bastard, what's that gonna mean for the world my character inhabits? Or am I going to choose to start out as an evil bastard who, through the interactions with the other NPCs, is going to end up as a positive good guy by the end, or vice versa? These various permutations in both the gameplay, your own player character, and the world your player character inhabits are what make an RPG interesting to me. And you can't do fucking any of that with Goku, because his appearance is already determined. His personality is determined. What he's going to learn and do in the story is already determined. And before someone tells me, well, you don't know, Ivan, maybe this game will let you, instead of learning the Kaioken, let you learn something else. But motherfucker, there are much more higher budget video games out there, made by more competent people who aren't able to integrate those kinds of choices and consequences into their storylines. And you really think that a fucking CyberConnect 2 game by Bandai Namco, who have a yearly release schedule for big Dragon Ball releases, are going to be able to pull that off? Like, what fucking planet do you exist on, and what drugs do I have to take to go there? Because it sounds a whole hell of a lot more interesting and fun than this one is. Even characters in RPGs with somewhat pre-established traits like Commander Shepard, for example, are still more or less blank slates. Yeah, you can't change the name, but you can change basically everything else about them. Were they a war hero or a soul survivor? What is their class? How are they going to change and evolve? What kind of relationships they're going to have with their party members? These are all things that exist in a character like Commander Shepard, who has a pre-established history. Even Geralt from the Witcher video games, who has his own very well-established history, had to use some bullshit like amnesia to justify why he would hook up with Triss Merigold when he was always in love with Yennefer, for example. But that kind of stuff is not going to factor into Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, because the developers have said that they want to make something as close as possible to the Z experience. And the Z experience does not lend itself to an RPG space. Even Dragon Ball Xenoverse, which does let you choose the race, gender, abilities, and skills of your character, still inserts you more or less all the time into blatant rehashes of Z where you have no real effort or control over the plot. And that's a game where you have a fucking cipher instead of a pre-established character like Goku. Another issue with trying to make an open world RPG set during the later Z portion of the series is the locales themselves. Unless you ignore what Toriyama did with the environments later on, all you're going to get is 50 shades of barren, rocky wasteland, except one is gonna be on an island and the other one is gonna be on a boring green alien planet, I guess. And already from this footage that we already see, the world looks pretty damn empty. It doesn't look like there's much there to do. And hell, even reading a manga or watching the anime, the environments Toriyama had people fight in were pretty fucking boring already, and I can't imagine they're gonna be any more exciting to play in. A few other issues I have with it is some of the graphical stuff. Goku's model looks off. Sometimes he looks fine, but other times he doesn't. And I think that one of the biggest problems with trying to translate Goku into 3D is his hair. Goku's hair works on Mickey Mouse ears logic, where it changes almost completely depending on what angle you're seeing it from. But you can't really do that in 3D without it looking really weird, so you have to fix his hair on one side. And when you try to make something like Goku's hair in 3D, you have to be really, really skillful about it, or it's gonna look kinda derpy when you do it, which is an example here. The fighting system looks like Xenoverse. All the button inputs look identical to the Xenoverse material, and the Xenoverse fighting system, if you can even call it that, does not exactly inspire a lot of confidence in me. The way the visual effects are done feels very, very overblown, and there are several moments during both the gameplay and the most recent trailer where I cannot tell what the actual fuck is going on, but But all of this is secondary to my main issue, which I've already articulated beforehand. Making Dragon Ball Z the foundation of an open world RPG where you're going to strictly adhere to everything that happens in Z does not work. If you want to make an open world RPG with a Goku who can be more malleable, or at the very least a Goku who makes more sense for that kind of gameplay, hell, Dragon Ball GT makes more sense for a big open world RPG game than this does. Because in that game, you have Goku depowered back into a kid, and he's going into, with a few partners, into space. You could build entire worlds with vastly different kinds of subplots, characters, NPCs to interact with. Hell, considering the fact that it's GT, and a lot of people always cite GT as the series with good ideas but bad execution, with a GT game, you could potentially change up big swaths of the storyline to make it have more sense. You can have the Loot Cult appear on the very first planet as like a little subplot that goes through all of the worlds, and eventually they become the main antagonists for a time. All that stuff would, at the very least to me, be much more interesting than just an open world RPG that's gonna be severely gimped in every way that matters by fucking Dragon Ball Z.